can no longer accept that 1 in 5 women will be sexually assaulted in her college years. Would parents willingly send their teenagers to an institution where there is a 1 in 5 chance they would incur a serious, life-altering injury? We must also shift the role of men in this conversation. 3% of college men account for 90 to 95% of rapes. This is a critical number to understand. Men often feel as though they're being lumped together when we talk about violence against women. Educating everyone that these offenders are really a small part of the population can play a critical role in shifting this conversation and empowering men to be leaders in this conversation. While it is important that our colleges and universities have the best response to sexual assault and intimate partner violence, it is also critical that these institutions be at the forefront of preventing these crimes.
As Representative Flexer far more eloquently pointed out, I was very pleased a couple of weeks ago to be able to stand with many of my colleagues in the House and Senate from both sides of the aisle when all of the women got together to urge the committee to pursue this legislation, which provides an opportunity to clearly state our not just dissatisfaction but intolerance for a continuation of what many of us feel is perhaps not the safest environment for many of our citizens in Connecticut when we send them to college. A lot of us were very impacted by first the news and then the testimony last fall when we heard about the UConn students who were willing to come forward and talk about their experiences at the University of Connecticut on campus. And I think for many of us who had worked with issues concerning sexual assault for years, and we had seen Connecticut's laws and policy follow along really in a headlining position, leading the nation in many, many respects in these issues. It was devastating to understand from these students exactly their experiences. And I think that was compelling to me, certainly, but to many of us.
The message we want to convey as a group to the students, to families, the college community, and to the public is this is a very serious matter, and we're not waiting to act. As women of the House and Senate, we are committed, determined, and united to take action to address sexual violence on our school campuses.
I think the women of the House and Senate, as I like to refer to them, on both sides of the aisle, really like the idea of women coming together around an issue, and that there are some issues that resonate with women and are universal to women's concerns. And this was clearly one of those issues that all of us felt like this is something that we should do, we should get behind.
Women in both the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, got together as a group, and every one of us signed a letter to the committee asking that they raise a bill to, in this manner, deal with these issues at our colleges and universities in the state. What's important about that is that was a very bipartisan, broad coming together for a specific purpose, and it actually happens a lot more in this building than maybe the public always sees.
I am so grateful to you for really going in the heart of darkness when it comes to this problem. It's an opportunity not only to deal with the victims, but also the victimizers. You know, we're about to graduate people from college with degrees, with potentially predatory natures who are going out there into the larger universe. When things began to happen at UConn, and some of the young women there were saying they really didn't feel that they were heard or that efforts were made to make their environment safe, that's something that resonated with all of us across party lines.
Obviously, their allegations were of paramount concern to us, and we wanted to go back and look at the policies and procedures and what, if any, Connecticut could be doing better.
The bill takes that existing legislation and requires universities and colleges across the state in a uniform manner to have clear memorandums of understanding with the providers independent outside providers of services to help victims, not only to help them immediately with their physical needs and to get help for those, but with reporting and counseling, treatment, and understanding all of their options. The second part of the bill is strengthens the reporting mandate that these institutions must comply with. And that's critical because there's been a lot of discussion about the impact of this type of reporting for the institution. Whether, for example, an institution that reports regularly and therefore comes up with maybe a larger number of reported incidents on campus is in a stronger and better position because they're honest and because they're supporting their students, or is the problem really that there is a lack of vigilance or a permissive attitude at that institution? That's very unclear. And I think this will get us to clearer opinions, clearer reporting, and then that reporting finally is made public so that people have the opportunity when they're looking at institutions to understand what the environment will be like.
The Clery Act is a federal regulation that we all, as institutions across the country, report statistics on our crime reports. And so those come out every October, and they cover every crime statistic from the previous calendar year. And so that is a federal regulation for all schools to be abiding by.
The requirements in this bill mirror federal legislation that was passed last year but doesn't take effect for quite a few years. It pushes Connecticut out ahead of that in terms of the timing. And that's really important, particularly for our students. When they're looking at colleges and universities with their families, they have a right to know what type of environment, what the climate is like surrounding this reprehensible situations on their campuses, and what kind of support will be available for them if some unfortunate event occurs and they're victimized. So it's really important, I think, that students pay attention to that and understand first that Connecticut will be doing a great job in pushing it a little further than maybe a lot of states around us are ready to do immediately, but also that they're entitled to have this information and to understand this before they make their final decisions.
For about 30 years, we've been paying a lot of attention to sexual violence in some forms and doing research about that. And there's tons of evidence out there that shows that in places where, again, you're talking about hegemonic masculinities or folks being really concerned about what their other teammates might think and sort of being hesitant then to speak up based on some of the negative social outcomes of that, that is heightened basically in those settings. And so it's a place where folks have a lot of power in some ways, and a place, again, where folks are going to reinforce negative behaviors or stay silent about them to not sort of bear the wrath of the people around them. Certainly athletics is a great example, Greek life is another great example, and there's also some evidence to show that sexual violence perpetration rates rise in those settings.
As a cultural issue, we find that many of our students, particularly our male population, are coming to college campuses not always well equipped to deal with independent living. Socialization issues are key for them. And also, where's their education been at? So it's certainly our responsibility to respond to that, and that's a kind of a culture shift. But we also have to get to the parents too and talk with them and find out where the students have been K through 12 and what the parents' expectations are.
It's important not to go in with the mindset of accusing everybody there of possibly being a perpetrator, and rather looking at them as allies and saying, listen, we know that the percentage is really small of people that are actually going to commit these crimes, and you are all part of the solution to help us eradicate that, because as working with athletes and working with men in general really proves that this isn't just a women's issue, that this is a human rights issue, and that we can all play a role in ending the violence.
I think that for us the ideal outcome is that institutions are taking a little bit of a larger responsibility, and that the responses in some ways are institutionalized so that across the campuses everybody has access to their rights, everybody knows what those rights are, what their various options are, and that survivors across the board feel supported in whatever option they might choose after surviving a sexual assault.
I think that was really what was disturbing with the cases at the University of Connecticut and the other cases that came to light, was really how students were handled afterwards. after reporting an incident. Obviously, the first focus is prevention, but once you've had an assault, you know, is it a safe environment, and is it a supportive environment? Do students feel comfortable coming forward and reporting? Do they know they're going to be treated well and supported?
I think the best outcome for the bill will be if it becomes like a collaborative effort between both the state of Connecticut as a leader in legislation in this area, partnering with the colleges and universities of the state to not only make sure that we're doing what we need to do in terms of compliance, but that we're also becoming something of an industry leader and an incubator for coming up with best practices when it comes to addressing these issues. Because our ultimate goal down the road is to end the violence on campus, but that's a long road. And we're going to need to go through a lot of assessment and a lot of practices and assessing how we're doing. And it's going to take a collaborative effort to get there.
I mean, the fact that the government is taking such an increased awareness and knowledge about these issues is such a huge step in the right direction, because we're doing such great work on college campuses all across the state, and so the fact that it's being brought to a bigger level and that more folks are aware of that is going to make for a huge culture shift, because I think that what's really important is that we are doing a lot of work educating folks on campus, and that this work does need to trickle out to the greater community, so that folks sitting on juries hearing these cases in their local jurisdictions are aware of the issues and aren't just familiar with what they see on TV as sort of the stereotypical sexual assaults.
It's one of the other things that we know about sexual assault is that we need ongoing training, so annually, making sure that S.A.R.T team members are trained annually. A S.A.R.T is a sexual assault response team, and what they are is anybody the survivor might come in contact with or need to come in contact with following disclosing a sexual assault. So for example, you definitely would want victim advocates there, both on and off campus. You would want law enforcement or whatever sort of local police force might be present on the campus. You certainly would want outside police. You would want maybe a prosecutor present. You would want folks in health and wellness present. You would want counseling present. Anybody that a student might need to interact with, for example, housing is another great person to have there. So if I'm in class with my offender, I need to change that. I need to change that class, and particularly he needs to be removed from that class. So it's anybody who might have an ability to interact with a survivor in a professional capacity following a sexual assault.
As a step-parent and an aunt, I talked to a lot of administrators, and people seem to talk about they're trying to do something, but they talk about the larger culture and what's happening in the society, and they kind of hold up their hands. There's only so much you can do. And the reality is, I think we need to build zero tolerance at universities. It's something we need to talk about. It's something we need to own.
Our idea at Connecticut College in particular is all around changing that cultural shift so that we are an active community that sees every single one of us as a possible solution to this issue. That it's not just about educating potential perpetrators and potential victims, but creating an area where everybody is part of this as active bystanders.
And bystander intervention is basically, there's some theory behind it, lots of research behind it that's going to show that it's a way to empower entire communities to hold offenders accountable. It also creates a space in which everybody in that campus community has a way to hold one another accountable, not just for offending behaviors, but things like sexism, racism, homophobia, and all those different cultural aspects that make it so that sexual violence is able to be perpetrated in the end, and sort of those offenders sort of walk away from it without somebody questioning or holding them accountable for their behavior.
It can't just be from the top down, from the administration down. It has to be from the kids on up. The kids, the professors, the athletes, the coaches, everyone involved living in these environments. I always say it should be a very safe ecosystem. Kids are going there to learn, and they're so excited to be learning. They're so excited to be learning and exploring and pushing the boundaries a little bit. Sometimes it's the first time your child has really lived out in the world without curfews and all of the things that we impose on them as parents, and they're kind of learning how to make their way. And you want that to be as safe and as an environment as possible. So, I really feel that everyone needs to take ownership. The coaches, the teams, the social groups, the fraternities, when that behavior manifests itself.
At Connecticut College, we implemented Green Dot as a bystander intervention program back in the fall of 2010. And the idea is that no one has to do everything, but everyone has to do something. And so that is how we're going to create that large culture shift. And so over the past 4 years, we have had numerous students go through sort of an introduction speech about Green Dot, and then over 500 students have voluntarily gone through a 6-hour Green Dot bystander intervention training, and has created a community of Green Dot grads on campus, and has been really instrumental in working to change the culture at Connecticut College.
Here in Connecticut, we started in partnership with Men Can Stop Rape 2 years ago, started the Where Do You Stand campaign, which is specifically a bystander intervention model that engages men. So we know that the bulk of sexual violence perpetration is taking place by men, and therefore they have a really important role in being able to end sexual violence and certainly speak up when other men are perpetrating sexual violence.
We have just recently signed on with the Where Do You Stand campaign. Fairfield University for a number of years now has been also doing a lot of work with the Fairfield Police Department with some bystander programs that we've created specific to our campus. We really take time to do a lot of our men-to-men programs. We're a Jesuit Catholic university, so we also access our Jesuit community on campus, along with our public safety officers, to work with our male population in particular, to bring awareness around some of these issues. And it's really paid off well. We're hearing from a lot of our students who are upperclassmen who've graduated that they really appreciated that, and to also come back as peers to talk with younger students, perhaps in roles as RAs or new student leaders or student government representatives, to kind of pass that message along. They want to take ownership of it as peers and as adults, frankly.
The campaign actually is going well. So we had the first year of it where we unveiled the campaign. We were able to get some key stakeholders involved. Senator Blumenthal was the first actual man to sign in Connecticut the pledge. And we certainly have lots of places. For example, at Trinity College, we're training the entire baseball team, the entire football team on bystander intervention models, in a hope that, because they're also seen as leaders on that campus, what they'll be able to do is bring it back, the messaging back to the rest of the campus. So we hope going forward that we'll see not only more campuses, but more workplaces, legislators, anybody who's interested in preventing sexual violence, have us come out and talk to them and give them those skills and tool sets to be able to be those active bystanders.
The bottom line with sexual assault on college campuses is we expect to send our students to a safe learning environment. Learning's not going to take place if someone doesn't feel supported, if they don't feel safe, and that's a basic. Whether you're a parent sending your child away or a student who's away from home for the first time, you want to know that you're someplace that is not tolerant of sexual violence on campus.